programs and initiatives that align with that original mission. I'm Coby Davis, and I serve as the president of Branch 60AC. We hope that you'll enjoy the program this evening, but more than anything, we hope you will join us in the fight for equality for all. If you're not currently a member of the NAACP, we invite you to join. We'll make sure that you can find it on our webpage. There is a place to sign up right there. Guys, thank you so much. And I introduce our guest soloist to sing the Negro National Anthem, Jarron Gray.
Hello, hello. Can everybody hear me? All right. I'm so sorry about that. All right. Today I will be singing before you all lift every voice and sing. So please find it in your hearts to resonate with the song. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the hope that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jarron, for sharing with us that song. Miss Raven Cook is next to give us a history of the NAACP.
Thank you so much, Joy. The President Davis, members of the Executive Board, members of the NAACP 60AC branch, and friends. My name is Raven Cook, and I am honored to speak with you all this evening. I serve as the Youth Work and Young Adult Committee Chair. Tonight, I've been asked by President Davis to offer brief remarks of the history of the NAACP. We as a nation are continuing a fight and will need to be equipped with the understanding that we as an organization have been active voices during America's most vehement tests and trials. And even in our differences, we as an organization have triumphed through a commitment to justice. Beginning at the turn of the 20th century, African Americans were faced with the daunting task of seeking to advance in a country resistant to seeing them as equal. While they were legally free from the system of enslavement, unless you were incarcerated, which is still language connected to the massive prison industrial complex today, de jure and de facto laws were being put in place to remove opportunities for access for Black Americans. In that critical moment, Black America was under the weight of rampant racial violence. Beatings, rapes, and lynchings were ubiquitous, particularly in 1908, when a race riot in Springfield, Illinois, set the founders of this organization in motion. The support of systems structured to highlight legal and political efforts of scientific racism in the movement continued with writings like Heredity of Relations to Eugenics by Charles Davenport, and were popular in popular culture with minstrelsy, and had ingrained itself so deep into the American narrative that even today we are still trying to reiterate the problematic origins. Despite the darkness of the time, Black Americans continued fighting for liberation through historical meetings like the Niagara Movement in 1905, which would become a precursor to the NAACP. The Niagara Movement gathered 29 voices from all over and met in Ontario, Canada. The movement created a manifesto that would call for full access to civil liberties, building brotherhood, and a dismantling of racist systems. These men and women were influenced by voices at the time like Booker T. Washington, who advocated for Black people instead to practice an accommodationist ideology, asking Blacks to wait for access. It is important to reiterate that while Black people are mobilizing for the advancement of their community, they are doing it in different ways. Echoing this movement, the NAACP would form to become the anchor of the 20th century, and these different philosophies would set the stage for the development of the organizations that would collaboratively make up the civil rights movement. United through a call for uplift, men and women like Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, William Monroe Trotter, and Mary Church Terrell were coming together and seeking to build an organization that challenged America to live up to its true creed. They partnered with white men and women like Oswald Garrison Villiard and Mary White Ovington, and yes, these relationships began with their challenges, but the Black founders saw one path for advancement and white founders saw another. This context is important in our understanding of how we collectively can progress forward by looking at the problematic positions of our past. Despite the challenges in the ideology, the mission was clear: stop the overt violent attack on Black Americans. The effort to enact legislation for protection against lynching would be a fight that the organization would fight until 2018, when a bipartisan bill was passed after producing 200 attempts. In 1910, the NAACP will build a national office in New York, establish the Crisis magazine, and win the case Gwynn versus the United States. In 1913, chapters developed in Kansas City, Missouri, Baltimore, Boston, Massachusetts, and Washington, D.C., and Detroit, Michigan. Additionally, with the fight to ban the film The Birth of a Nation in 1915, the NAACP would dive into challenging the racist structures manifesting in American popular culture. During the period leading up to World War I, as Black soldiers left and returned home from fighting in World War I, the same battles they fought before leaving, the NAACP began mobilizing using those soldiers in 1917. The organization held a silent march with over 10,000 people in New York to speak against lynching and racial terror. 2 years later, in 1919, the NAACP would have over 300 branches and 90,000 members during the height of one of the most violent times in American history, known as Red Summer. Dr. Du Bois during this period was also writing in the Crisis magazine, observing and emphasizing the roles of Black men and women in efforts to uplift the race in a variety of professions, including the visual arts, literature, military service, etc. Du Bois was using the organization as a tool to change the view Black people had, not only politically, but socially as well. Working with visual artists like Aaron Douglas, who would act as artistic director of the Crisis magazine for a period. And also working with writers like Jessie Fawcett, who became known as the midwife of the Harlem Renaissance, Langston Hughes, County Cullen, and James Weldon Johnson, who would become the first Black executive secretary of the NAACP in 1920. And also penned the poem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, that would eventually become a musical arrangement created by his brother and become the National Negro Anthem, which we just heard. Another impactful voice of the NAACP was that of Walter White, a journalist who would go on to serve as executive secretary of the organization and commit himself to research on lynchings. White also worked with Mary McLeod Bethune to push President Roosevelt to work to create an anti-lynching legislation, which President Roosevelt resisted emphatically. while it also was critical in the fight of appointments against appointments of racist judges like Judge John Parker to the U.S. Supreme Court, and once again fought with the Roosevelt administration to gain economic access for Black Americans during the Great Depression. Through the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, the NAACP fought the battle for justice and school desegregation, hiring titans like Howard Law School Dean Charles Hamilton Houston to serve as National NAACP Chief Counsel. His protege and future Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall and attorney Constance Baker Motley, who would eventually become a judge and political power in New York. Collectively, these three and an interracial group of attorneys would test cases in the Deep South, meet with families, and fight to dismantle segregation. The NAACP was also working with women like Septima P. Clark to make sure Black teachers received equal pay in particularly South Carolina. Civil rights pioneers like Ella Baker and Rosa Parks were also serving in the organization as field agents, working particularly with the youth and seeking to build a consciousness of Black communities on their rights as citizens of the United States. Also, men like Medgar Evers and E.D. Nixon are risking their very lives in places like Mississippi and Alabama, encouraging Black people to participate, to vote, to go to stores, and to go to stores where they could be treated like equals. When we think of the NAACP, we must be clear that the organization is reaching into the parts of the country and mounting opposition to the very forces that are seeking to oppress not only Black Americans, but all people who desire freedom and justice for all. In 1954, the Brown versus Board of Education case marks a radical shift in the power of the organization as the case overturns Plessy versus Ferguson, the 1896 ruling making separate but equal law. During the 1960s, under the leadership of Roy Wilkins, the organization went through a period where it was challenged by other civil rights organizations. But collaboration prevailed in keeping the organization a vital asset to the movement. The 1970s and through the 1990s would see the leadership of Benjamin Hooks, who would push the organization's several programs like Women in the NAACP, which still exists today. Future executive directors would include Mrs. Murley Evers Williams and the late Julian Bond. The Northwest Arkansas 60 AC branch was chartered on October 19, 2013 through the vision and activism of Dr. John L. Colbert. In a modern context, the national organization has continued to be at the forefront of conversations and actions to end police brutality, voter suppression, housing inequity, and seating of corrupt judges, unqualified judges, and at the forefront of conversations on access to provide diverse, equitable education practices in schools. We are a part of a historic organization that has its roots deep in the American history. Please take time and remember as we go forward to never forget to look back and remember the shoulders you stand on, because they are giants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ravencook. This is our youth worker for young adults here, a part of the local chapter of NAACP. Next up will be Mr. Barry Jefferson. He is the president of the NAACP chapter in Jacksonville. Thank you so much, sir, for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Joy, for this opportunity. Thank you to Dr. Davis for his invitation. And thank you, Raven, for an outstanding history lesson that we need to know about this great organization that we are a part of. I just want to say greetings from Jacksonville, Arkansas, from one of the best branches in this state, Branch 6289. On behalf of my executive committee and members of this branch, we want to say thank you. We want to thank you for inviting us to come and speak to you for a few minutes about partnerships. And partnerships are the most important things that we are doing right now in this organization. That's how we lead, that's how we build, that's how we do the things that we are doing for our community. And I think that's very important. I'm telling you some of the partners that we are partnering with right now. One, this is a partnership with both of our organizations working together to advance our organization by understanding what each area is going through, by lending a hand to support them. That's so important right now We have so many organizations that we are partnering with as a state organization, because I also serve as the political action chair for the state. And we partner with organizations like the Citizen First Congress, who's fighting all these bad bills that they are doing down in session that is hurting people of color, that's hurting low-income families. We are fighting on civil rights. We are fighting on education. We are fighting on voter rights, because they are coming out the woodworks to destroy people who don't have a voice. So we try to be that voice for them. And we want to thank our partners. We're partnership right now with the Bail Project, a great organization that's out there supporting low-income families that have issue paying cash bail. We have a system that is not for low-income families. And we are fighting hard to change that system, because we need to get rid of cash bails. So you're gonna see this coming pretty soon in this session, that we are planning on putting some legislation in this session to fight these cash bail bonds. Those are so many things that we are doing right now to make sure people's voices are heard. So I want to say thank you again. I don't want to be too long, because I could be long-winded. And I just want to say thank you again for this opportunity to speak to you. Congratulations to our organization on our Founder Day. Thank you, Northwest Arkansas, for doing some great things. Continue the great work. Continue to call on us when you need us. Again, thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jefferson, for speaking tonight. We definitely appreciate the work you're doing locally for us, and we look forward to just hearing more about the work that you're doing politically. Now, please welcome Ms. RoAnne Elliott. She works for the Washington County Community Remembrance Project. She will introduce our speaker, and the next voice you will hear after her will be Mr. Kwami, who is our guest speaker. Thank you, Ms. RoAnne.
Thank you. I am so honored to be here to celebrate Founders Day, and especially to introduce and to hear our speaker, Kwami Abdul-Bey. Kwami is a native of Little Rock. He and his wife, Clarice, co-founded the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement in 2018. They are also co-hosts of Jadestone Vintage Soul on KABF 88.3 FM community radio, along with their 5-year-old son, Lorne. Kwami graduated with honors from Little Rock Central High School in 1989 and attended the U.S. Air Force Academy. He is the grandnephew of Lonnie Dixon, a Little Rock teenager who died in the Arkansas electric chair on his 17th birthday in 1927, without due process and without equal protection, after being convicted with no physical evidence of murdering a white girl. The true significance of this familial relationship was awakened within Kwami during his visit to the Equal Justice Initiative's Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice with his wife, Clarice, and their children. As a result of that experience, Clarice and Kwami co-founded the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement immediately upon their return home, with the goal of creating the environment where the 492 plus documented victims of historical racialized violence in the state of Arkansas could be properly memorialized. Their work with the APJMM has led to the founding of the Central Arkansas chapter of Coming to the Table and the inaugural observance of the National Day of Racial Healing in the state of Arkansas in 2020. APJMM, in partnership with several other organizations, sponsored the 2021 National Day of Racial Healing in January. During that observance, APJMM successfully encouraged over 100 mayors and county judges throughout the state to issue proclamations pledging their full support for racial healing and reconciliation. Mayor Lionel Jordan of Fayetteville was the very first mayor to join this effort. Kwami is the author of a soon-to-be-introduced bill sponsored by State Senator Joyce Elliott and 5 other legislators that will create the Arkansas Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Commission, along with a framework to establish a community remembrance project in each of the 75 counties of the state. This bill will also empower the commission to fully exonerate wrongfully convicted defendants in historical events of racialized violence, beginning with 122 defendants in the Elaine Race Massacre of 1919. Kwami is a lifetime NAACP member who serves as the Legislative and Political Action Chair of the Jacksonville branch under President Barry Jefferson. He's also the author of the 2001 award-winning and best-selling The Tables Have Turned, A Street Guide to Guerrilla Lawfare, and currently is an honors senior at Liberty University School of Law. In December 2020, Kwami was chosen by the Ford Motor Company as one of its 10 national Ford Freedom Heroes of COVID-19 for his founding of the acclaimed Shelter-in-Place virtual film series in March 2020. And last month, both he and his wife Clarice were named 2021 Arkansas Peacemakers of the Year. I am so privileged to present to you Kwami Abdul-Bey. Thank you.
Good evening. How's everyone doing? I would like to first and foremost thank the leadership of the Arkansas State Conference of the NAACP for this 112th anniversary of Founders Day. That would be Frank Shaw, Tommy Daniels, Wanda V. Neal, Reverend Jerry Jennings, Gloria Catha, Alicia Middleton, Diane Curry, and Jim Lyons. And I'd also like to thank the leadership of the Northwest Arkansas branch in their 8 years of existence, led by Dr. Coby Davis, Monique Jones, Edwin Strickland, Carla Thomas, Dr. John Colbert, Joy McGowan, and Noah Meeks. Basically, what I want to do this evening is Raven Cook. Raven Cook did such an excellent job on the history of the NAACP, which we all need to know. Me, myself, being a historian, I am a member of the Board of Trustees for the Arkansas Historical Association. So history really excites me, and I was very excited by the presentation that Raven gave us, and I want to build on that. She talked about the branches of the NAACP and the trunk. I want to go deep down and talk about the roots of the NAACP. And let me figure out how to share my screen, and then we can get this started. There we go. All right, here we go. Since the last time that the NAACP celebrated its day of founding, its Founders Day, in that 365 days, the world has literally flipped in the importance of some very valuable principles to a standpoint where we now have a paradigm shift. The paradigm shift, of course, it was brought on by the COVID-19 worldwide pandemic, and it was fed into by such names as George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. Their horrific deaths gave this country an opportunity to really reevaluate what it is they feel is important. And the NAACP, just as Raven talked about, has an important mission in dealing with this paradigm shift, especially because even though we do have people that are realizing, yes, we are living in a country that does have a deep historical legacy of racialized violence against people of color, there's still some people that do not recognize that. Okay, let me see if I can get this to work. There are still some people that do not recognize the significance of that, and they cling to the vintages of that history. On January the 6th, 2021, we experienced a violent, deadly lynch mob at the United States Capitol. And what that is, and what we should take that is as a reminder of the things, the issues that brought the NAACP in existence. They are still there. And not only are they still there, they are as relevant today as they were 112 years ago. But what I want to talk about is something that happened back in 1830, when we talk about the roots of the NAACP. Back in 1830, at the Bethel AME Church in Philadelphia, there was the first ever documented meeting of quite a number of freed, and self-liberated Black men and women who all came together to begin the conversation of talking about how we in the Black community can defend ourselves against the racist terror that is inflicted upon us as a community and as individuals. And this meeting led to what is now known as the Colored Conventions Movement. That Colored Conventions Movement lasted for a total of 70 years, beginning in early 1830 and ending in late 1890. And that Colored Convention Movement, there are right now, historians know of more than 200 conventions that happened in cities throughout North America, including the Canadian provinces, including the US states, the American states, including the Mexican states. There were 200 colored conventions that were localized in the particular territories that I just mentioned. And there were also 3 different national colored conventions where Black and white men from throughout North America came together to have these meetings to begin the discussions on self-defense of the Black community. Here in Arkansas, there were 2 colored conventions. The first one was held in 1865, just 7 months after Arkansas conceded defeat in the Civil War. In meeting in that convention in 1965 in Little Rock, you see the list of the names of the Black men that came together. And you definitely want to do some research on these names, because these are some very important men that are the unsung heroes of Black Arkansas history. Particularly the last name on the list is Nathan Ware. Nathan Ware is an extremely important name, just as well as William H. Gray is an extremely important name that I definitely encourage you, when you get an opportunity, to do some research on. If you could just do research on those 2 individuals, do it. But I would definitely say that you should research all of these individuals, because it tells a narrative that brings us to the founding of the NAACP. The colored conventions those 200 meetings that lasted over a 70-year period spawned 3 different organizations. Those 3 different organizations had some very similar goals. All 3 of them had as their goal mainly to end the lynching that was going on throughout the United States. The first of those organizations that was founded on November the 14th, 1864 was the National Equal Rights League, which was founded by Henry Highland Garnett, Frederick Douglass, and John Mercer Langston. If you look at the list of the notable members there, you'll see some of the same names that Raven mentioned when she talked about the history of the NAACP. And you'll notice in this conversation that I'm having that there is a reason. Ida B. Wells, she mentioned. Mary Church Terrell, she mentioned. William Trotter Monroe, she mentioned. These were members of the National Equal Rights League, which actually had 2 iterations. The first iteration was in 1864. The second iteration began its existence in the late 1880s, early 1890s. And if you look at that list, I'm going to highlight some familiar names that should be familiar to all of us as Arkansans. Mary Burnett Talbert of Little Rock, Arkansas. Mary Church Terrell of Little Rock, Arkansas. Mame Stewart Josenberger of Fort Smith, Arkansas. Scipio Africanus Jones of Little Rock, Arkansas. These were members of the National Equal Rights League. The second organization that came out of the Colored Conventions movement was the National Afro-American League, and it had a second iteration, and it changed its name to the National Afro-American Council. It was founded by Timothy Thomas Fortune, Bishop Alexander Walters, Dr. Booker T. Washington, and Congressman George Henry White. And you look at that list, those are some names that you should definitely see familiarity because these names come up in your Black history books. And if I highlight some of these names, again, you'll find some names that are very interesting because of their Arkansas connections. Mary Church Terrell of Little Rock. George Edwin Taylor, who was born in Little Rock, and he was the first Black man to ever run for president of the United States on a major political party ticket. And then we also see Elias Camp Morris. Reverend Elias Camp Morris was the founder of Centennial Baptist Church in Helena, Arkansas. And he also, along with my grandfather, Albert Bernard Moorhead, and my grand uncle, Reverend Frederick T. Guy, they worked together and they founded what we now know as Arkansas Baptist College. But you see on this list, just like on the list before, you see Ida B. Wells Barnett and Mary Church Terrell being in both of these organizations, membership in both organizations. Let's look at the third organization and you'll find their names again. The third organization that came out of the Colored Conventions movement was the National Citizens Rights Association, which was founded by Judge Albion Weinger Turgay. And the notable members, again, Ida B. Wells Barnett, as I said before, and you see again, we have Mary Church Terrell of Little Rock. Now, why is it important that Mary Church Terrell of Little Rock and Ida B. Wells, who lived in Memphis and had several connections in Arkansas, particularly well known for her work in helping Scipio Africanus Jones in the Elaine Race Massacre of 1919. These two women are very important because they are at the forefront in this nation of the anti-lynching movement. Ida B. Wells Barnett and Mary Church Terrell, and as Raven just told us, they are among the founders of the NAACP, the founding members. And if you look at these three lists, you will see a lot of familiar names that are also connected to the NAACP. Why are these three organizations and the NAACP important? Why are the colored conventions movement, why is that movement important? It's important, these organizations are important because it is an opportunity for us as Black people to stand up against structural violence, avoidable and traumatizing use of force against us as a people for no other reason but to make money, to make profit. And that is one thing that is extremely important about the mission of the NAACP. And it's extremely important that we call it what it is, structural violence. I use the word structural violence because systemic racism, it is I'm looking for a word, ubiquitous word that really, it cannot really give you a common understanding of what is exactly going on, because racism to one person is not racism to another person. So when you say systemic racism to John may understand what you mean, but when you say systemic racism to Peter may have a totally different understanding of that word and may really be turned against you as far as support is concerned. So I use structural violence because everyone understands and knows what violence is, because we have all at one point in our lives been victims of some type of violence. When I think of structural violence, I always think of one of my most favorite quotes from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And that quote is, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And justice is what the NAACP has fought for over the last 112 years. And I am so proud to be a life member of the NAACP, as well as my wife and my children, who we all just recently joined within the last year, because it is our goal to make sure that we are in the fight. And just as the example of Ida B. Wells Barnett and Mary Church Terrell, they were members of all of these organizations that I just mentioned. And in the same manner, my wife and my children and I, we decided that it is important for us to get life memberships to all of these organizations that are fighting for justice. So we have life membership in both the NAACP and in the Urban League, because we are here in Arkansas fighting for justice. But I want to show you what we think of when we think of justice. Justice, if we look at the literal etymological definition of justice, and if you see on the screen, you see where it's defined in the Federalist Papers. It's defined as justice is the end of government. It's the end of civil society, which means that government was created for no other purpose but to give justice to the people, to the governed. Civil society exists for one reason and one reason only, to make sure that all civilians enjoy justice. And the thing is for justice to be realized, we have to pursue it until it is obtained, or until liberty, our liberty is lost in that pursuit. And that is what the NAACP has done over the last 112 years. They have continually pursued justice and will continue to pursue justice. And I am so glad that I am now part of that pursuit. My wife and I, we sat down one day and we came up with a list of just what does justice look like? Because you realize that justice is multi-layered, justice is multifaceted. So we came up with this list of 18 different aspects of justice that we believe that all people should know and pursue. One thing that the NAACP is known well for is in pursuing and fighting for political justice and pursuing and fighting for electoral justice. Raven just also mentioned that the NAACP has very important work in housing justice and in labor justice. Barry Jefferson mentioned some of the work that we're doing at the Jacksonville branch. And he mentioned the bills that we have been fighting in this current legislature. One victory that we recently were able to experience dealt with education justice in our fight against HB 1218 and HB 1231, which were two very racist and structurally violent bills that looked to literally make illegal Raven Cook's presentation, because it would make it illegal to talk about certain aspects of history. When we talk about justice, what is the end of justice? One thing that we've always been taught is we've been taught that justice is equality. And I was taught that growing up, and I realized that equality is not what I thought it was. If you look on the left of your screen, you see these three gentlemen are equal because they have equal boxes that they're standing on. Each box is equal in size and length. So they have equal footing. What we need to do is we need to understand that equal footing is not the end goal that we need to be fighting for. We need to be fighting for equitable footing. If you look in the other picture, you see equitable footing allows us all to participate, and it allows for us to participate because each of our handicaps, each of our deficiencies are addressed to give us all the same ability to look over the fence at the game. And when I think about the work that Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Project does in our fight for racial equity and social justice throughout the state of Arkansas, one other thing that is equitable in my mind is our ability here in Arkansas to not only be outraged at what we see on national television when it comes to the Breonna Taylors and the Ahmaud Arbery's and the George Floyd's, but we also need to know and say the names of those victims of police violence and misconduct here in our own state. And we have a list of, I have the wrong one up here. This only has 39. There's actually 44 people, Arkansans, who have unarmed Arkansans who have died at the hands of law enforcement just in the last 5 years. And it's very important that in addition to us knowing the names of Ahmaud Arbery, knowing the names of George Floyd, we also know these names as well. And not only know the names and say the names, but also get into the fight to seek justice for these families who have wrongfully lost their family members. All right, so I was asked to talk a little bit about me and a little bit about the work that I do along with my wife, Clarice. Um, and the first thing that I just want to say, because I'm not going to talk a lot, RoAnne did a really good job of telling you a lot about me in that wonderful introduction. But one of the highlights of the work that I've done is back in 2000, I published a book called "The Tables Have Turned: A Street Guide to Guerrilla Lawfare," and that book basically, my premise in writing the book is it was the summer of, I think it was 1998, here in Little Rock. During that summer, there were 5 Black young men that were all killed by the Little Rock Police Department during that one summer. And it was my goal to find a way to teach young people how to deal with police-citizen interactions and confrontations and be able to go home and hug their mothers and fathers after that confrontation is over. So I spent about a good 5 years studying hours at a time, 7 days a week at the ULR Law Library, and came up with this book, The Tables Have Turned, which was received very well. And if anybody here is interested in a copy, I'll definitely share with you the link where you can download this edition. It's like I said, it's a 20-year-old edition. I'm in the process of writing the 25th anniversary edition, which will be coming out in the next couple of years. The work that Clarice and I do, we are the founders of a nonprofit called the Ouachita Foothills Youth Media Arts and Literacy Collective. And basically what we do is we teach young people how to tell their stories in their voice using media. And in using that media, we've also brought in another aspect where these young people that you see pictured here, they work with the Little Rock Central High School Memory Project, where they actively go into the community and interview their elders, to get stories of history that are not in any history books. And then they make those recordings available. My wife, Clarice, she takes the recordings and creates podcasts of those conversations that the young people have with their elders, particularly elders who have experienced some type of historical racialized violence and terror in their families. One of the projects of the Ouachita Foothills Youth Media Arts and Literacy Collective is the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement. And as it was mentioned earlier, this organization came about after a trip to the National Lynching Museum in Montgomery, Alabama, and me seeing the work of attorney Brian Stevenson. And I tell you one thing, if you have not gone to the National Lynching Museum, I encourage each and every person on this call to schedule themselves once it's safe, once everyone feels that they're safe to travel and do such. But that museum, we left that museum literally in tears and in silence, because it is very hard to know that you live in a state that has the third highest number of lynchings of any other state, not just lynchings, but documented lynchings. So if we have 492 documented lynchings, that means there are probably 600 actual lynchings. What we did with this organization is we begun the process of actually locating the exact locations of these 492 lynchings. Those lynchings occurred in 72 of the 75 counties throughout Arkansas. So we work with organizations that are in the counties on the ground to help them locate the locations of these lynchings and then memorialize those victims of those lynchings. And that is very important. And I see how it connects to the history of the NAACP, because just as Raven taught us in her history lesson, is that the NAACP's founding members were very anti-lynching. And so this comes, the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement comes full circle to now we want to look at memorializing the victims of those lynchings and healing the communities of those lynchings. Because when you have structural violence, it is not just the victims who suffer and who are traumatized, but it's also the perpetrators who suffer and are traumatized. And what our goal is to bring together the descendants of the victims of these lynchings, as well as the descendants of the lynchers themselves and the lynch mobs, to start having courageous conversations sitting at the table with each other. And that's pretty much what we do. We were really put on pause in our physical work that we do because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we're starting to come back out of that. And we do have a memorialization scheduled for May of this year here in Pulaski County, where we have the Pulaski County Community Remembrance Project. There is a Hot Spring County Community Remembrance Project, and they have a memorialization scheduled for June of 2022. There is a Garland County Community Remembrance Project, and they are still working to schedule their first memorial. We have community remembrance projects in Craighead County, in Jefferson County, in Phillips County, and in I forgot what county Fort Smith is in, but in the Fort Smith area, we're working with some people as well. And I definitely want to take some opportunity to give some really mean appreciation for the work that RoAnne is doing there in Washington County. I do not have the dates of her community remembrance projects, upcoming memorialization. Maybe you can put that in the chat for everyone to know about. She did host an essay contest with the young people in the Fayetteville area just recently, and it was a virtual essay contest. So we definitely want to show that here in Arkansas, we're doing a holistic approach to these memorializations. The only other state that is doing it like we're doing it is Maryland, where the Maryland legislature has actually passed a law to create an apparatus where all of the counties in Maryland are working on this type of work. We do have a law that Senator Joyce Elliott will be introducing within the next week or so that will bring Arkansas up to that same standard where the law will actually create an apparatus where there is a community remembrance project in each of the 75 counties in the state of Arkansas that will be operated and funded by the county judge in each of the counties. And with that, all I just want to say is we are there for you. Showed you the websites where you guys can look and see what work Clarice and I are doing with our partners. We have a ton of partners. The main partner is Just Communities of Arkansas. And we partner with organizations throughout the state, including the NAACP and the Urban League. So I said all that just to say that the work continues. Yes, we have 112 years behind us, and we need to start planning for the next 20, 30, 40 years on what we want Arkansas to look like once justice has been fully attained and we have eradicated structural violence here in the state of Arkansas. Thank you. Oh, let me unshare. There we go.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Mr. Kwami Abdul-Bey. We greatly appreciate you sharing with us tonight, and we are so grateful for how you have just raised our awareness about the stories and the history of our people, and especially the history of where we are today. Thank you for bringing that awareness to us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. To all of our attendees, thank you all so, so much for coming tonight. This will conclude the end of our service for tonight. We appreciate you all for joining us via Zoom today. We know this is a little different and is not the same as being in person. As we close, I want us to just kind of remember some of the things that Mr. Kwami said tonight, and some of the things that were just given to us by everyone who was on our panel today. Understanding that this is our opportunity, right, to stand up against structural violence. That term is huge. It is not ambiguous, right? It tells us exactly where we're working toward and what systems we're trying to dismantle. And more than that, remembering the history, remember the history of where we've come, and as what Miss Raven said, that we stand on the backs of some giants, some men and some women who have done really great work in our community. As we close, I want to remind everyone that this is really hard stuff. What Mr. Kwami is talking about is remembering, erecting like memorials of people who have died and people who were murdered. These stories are difficult to listen, and this work is difficult to do. As many who have come before me have said, this is not a sprint, it is a marathon toward justice and toward equity. And so we at the NAACP here at the Northwest Arkansas Branch 60 would just like to remind everyone to take care of yourself, to engage in some mental health services of whatever you think you may need at this time. Locally, there is an organization doing some work that is offering discounted services for people who are interested in seeking counseling due to racial concerns because of all the race-based events that have happened within the last couple of years. And Mr. Kwami reminded us that actually this thing has been happening locally for us, at least for the last 5 years, where Black and brown folks have died because of police brutality. And so we hope that you all will seek the support you need and continue seeking justice, continue seeking equity. There are giants behind us. As we close, I want to leave you with a quote from Ida B. Wells herself, who is one of the founding women of the NAACP. She says, "I am only a mouthpiece to which to tell the story of lynching. And I have told it so often that I know it by heart. I do not have to embellish. It makes its own way. So we hope that you all continue to tell the story of justice and equity, and let's raise the world's awareness. Thank you for coming tonight. Thanks everybody for all your comments. Thank y'all so much for coming. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We greatly appreciate your presence. Thank you, everybody.